A little while ago, I had the honor of calling Senator Barack Obama to congratulate him. Please. I urge all Americans who supported me to join me in not just congratulating him, but offering our next president our goodwill and earnest effort to find ways to come together, to find the necessary compromises, to bridge our differences, and help restore our prosperity, defend our security in a dangerous world, and leave our children and grandchildren a stronger, better country than we inherited. Whatever our differences, we are fellow Americans. And please believe me when I say no association has ever meant more to me than that.
That was the late Senator John McCain during his concession speech after the 2008 presidential election. That was just over 15 years ago, but those calls for bipartisanship, civility, and hope seemed far removed from today's toxic political climate and active threats to democracy. Joining us now, senior fellow at the Brookings Institution and columnist for the Washington Post, Bob Kagan. He's author of the new book on sale today entitled Rebellion: How Anti-Liberalism is Tearing America Apart Again. Thank you for coming on the show. Let's start with the term anti-liberalism, if we may. Can you please define it?
Yeah, I mean, the word liberal is thrown around. It has a lot of meanings for a lot of different people. But what the essential thing about our founding was that it was a liberal government in the sense that it was about protecting individual rights for all people, universal, equal rights for all people, and that was what the government was founded on. And we have been. That system has been under attack at various different times throughout our history. Before the Civil War, obviously, the South was opposed to the Declaration of Independence. And even today, in fact, coming back today, these forces have returned that are opposed not just to the Biden administration, but to the general regime. They call it the regime that is the founders' system. And this is not just a Donald Trump problem. Some of his core supporters are committed to changing the system that we've been living under and undermining our democracy. And we need to understand that if Donald Trump wins, it won't just be the danger posed by Donald Trump, but by many people in his administration and by his strongest supporters who simply do not believe in the fundamental principles on which this government was founded.
And you write in the book, Bob, on the other hand, if he loses in November, he undoubtedly will call into question the outcome of the election, the results. We've seen this movie before, of course, 4 years ago. And then you sort of follow the dominoes even further from there, which is to say Republican-led states may change the way they work with or do not work with the federal government and view their own role in our culture, our society.
Yeah, for one thing, we kind of forget that the secession or the threat of secession was a very common feature of American government, certainly in the 19th century until the Civil War. It is always an option. And I think what we need to understand is that if Donald Trump loses, as I hope he does, and he declares that the election is fraudulent, this time he's going to have the Republican Party substantially supporting him. You'll see the leaders in both houses agree that the election was fraudulent because they're totally, supportive of whatever Trump says. And then the question is, what happens in heavily Republican states? States where the legislature is Republican, where the governor is Republican. We've already seen Texas recently, in a way, engaging in nullification by having its own, or trying to establish its own border control, which is not the way things are supposed to work. That is, and if you poll Americans, quite amazingly, a very high number in both parties talk about the possibility of secession if the wrong president, if the wrong person is elected president. So I do think that is something to worry about. The one thing that I think we can all be confident of is that if Trump loses, there will be a substantial resistance, perhaps violence. January 6th on a much greater level, and I think we won't be out of the woods even if Trump loses.
So, Bob, we have always had tremendous issues boiling in this country, forever. No matter what decade you're talking about, no matter what generation. But today, if you listen to the principal candidate for the Republican nomination for the presidency, he describes at times a country that to me is unrecognizable, a country that seems almost finished, a country that if he's not elected, it's over for this country. A country that if the election goes to Joe Biden this fall, it'll be the last free election we ever have. What has happened within the confines of all of that I just described to change, so drastically change the way we look at the country?
Well, I think what's happened is that the Republican Party has been captured by this fundamentally anti-liberal movement. It's a minority of the country. In fact, it's a shrinking minority of the country, insofar as it's made up primarily of white nationalists and white Christian nationalists, who are a shrinking portion of the country, but who have a significant influence, clearly, in the Republican Party and can control what everybody else does. And that has given Trump license. And in fact, he has summoned this group to him. You know, we were talking about John McCain's concession speech to Barack Obama, his gracious speech. How did Donald Trump introduce himself to the political scene in this country? In 2011, potentially for a 2012 run, he made his #1 issue the birther conspiracy. In other words, that the first black American president was not really an American. It's clear what he was doing when he did that. He was signaling, I am the candidate of white nationalism. And now he's made himself the candidate of white Christian nationalism, you know, with the Trump Bible and saying that he's going to teach America to pray again. This is from Donald Trump, of course, but he has that following. And so I think what we're seeing is not necessarily a fundamental misdirection of the United States, but a particular group that has always existed in this country has now seized control of one of our two political parties, and we're now paying the price for that.
And by the way, one of Donald Trump's first acts as a candidate was to attack John McCain and his heroism during his time in Vietnam. The new book is an eye-opener. It's titled Rebellion: How Anti-Liberalism is Tearing America Apart Again. Bob Kagan, thanks. Congrats on the book.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.